In the heart of southeastern Louisiana, the Livingston Parish Fire Protection District 4 stands watch over the community. It is more than an organization. It is a brotherhood built on the ideals of dedication, courage, and sacrifice. In minutes, a raging inferno can reduce a house and its inhabitants to ashes. Fire does not discriminate. It destroys livelihoods as readily as it destroys lives. But the men and women who have served at District 4 have bravely chosen to plunge into the fire so that others may live. Many of these brave souls are volunteers, but all of them serve with dedication to serve and to protect their community in the hour of its need.
Going into a burning building is something like you'll never experience. The heat, the flames, the darkness, some of us enjoy it. You know, it is scary because you're going into a building you're unfamiliar with. You have no idea of layout and you're trying to find your way through. Even with your protective clothing on, you can feel the heat, but it's challenging, you know, because you have to get in there to that fire and put that fire out. And you come back out and the fire doesn't. So you have the feeling of victory at the same time. But most people won't ever get to experience that.
It ain't fun. You put all your gear on and you go and hope and pray that nothing collapses on you and you find what you're looking for in a hurry so you can get out.
See, you got to respect that fire. I've had a few occasions with them and all. I've had a couple buildings fall on me. Before I ever became fire chief, right down here at the end of this road, they had a building down there that caught on fire one night. It was a little convenience store type building, you know. And they had like a lean-to roof all across the front of that building. Well, this hadn't burnt yet. And I was under that roof, putting water on the coals inside that building, when all of the brick and all started crumbling on the side of me and all. And I realized that roof is falling. I gotta get out from under it. And I turned around and run, get out from under that building, or roof, you know. And this roof, no telling how much it would weigh, several thousand pounds, and if it falls on me, what's gonna be left of me, you know. I turned and tried to get out from under it, and when I turned around, I got feet tangled up in the fire hose trying to run, and it tripped me. When I fell on the ground trying to roll out from under it then, I looked up and that roof wasn't but just like 4 or 5 feet above me.
It's hot. It's hot. You learn. You trust your training. You trust your equipment, and you trust your fellow firefighter. You go in, and if there's possible life at stake, you go in and do the best you can to make sure there's no one in there, or that don't happen. And then your second avenue is protect property. Try to put the fire out, save as much of their property as you can.
You focus on all your training, everything that you've had from day one, and you try to get in there and do what you can to find the fire, put it out, and get out of the building. It's very stressful, high amounts of heat, debris and stuff falling off of walls and stuff. So you try to go in, make the quickest attack you can, and get out.
As a firefighter, it's both exhilarating and terrifying. I'm sure you've watched TV shows and talked to people before. They talk about that fire literally has a life of its own. Well, it's almost like a living being. And to know that when you go into this home, that things could really turn sour. Your visibility is very limited. You've got a limited amount of air because you're carrying everything that you have to breathe on your back. You're dealing with temperatures into the thousands of degrees. You're pulling a heavy piece of hose behind you to help control the fire. You've got all this heavy equipment on. It's a challenge. It's something we'd rather not have to do, but if you trust in your equipment and you trust in your training and you have learned how to control the situation properly, it's very exhilarating. It really is.
I had a lot of the police officers that I worked with says, there's no way that you could pay me to go in a burning building. Well, I worked K-9 for almost 9 years, and I would go in a building with a burglar in the building, or sometimes an armed robber or something like that. You'd take your dog in there and you'd go in a building. Well, you don't know if that person has a knife or a gun or whatever, but you go in there because that's your job. Well, it's the same way with the fire department. You go in trying to put the fire out so that these people don't lose everything. You try to be as safe as you can because you want to be able to come out of that house, but you want to be able to stop the fire and save as much as you can.
In 1971, in the town of Walker, Louisiana, before the existence of District 4, there was a Walker Fire Department. The men who volunteered to run the small town fire department were brave, but untrained. Despite their greatest efforts, their success was very limited.
The fire department was actually known as the Walker Fire Department, and it was actually a small shed that was attached to the DPW department for the town. And we had one old piece of dilapidated equipment that some of the town workers and different people around the area community would volunteer to try to control fires. We really didn't have much fire protection. Mr. Pettitt came in and built the fire department from almost zero at that time.
Before I took over as fire chief, we had a fire department that they had 2 old fire trucks the town of Walker had. Very little equipment. These was old fire trucks. One of them wouldn't hardly run even. But we didn't have no fire department number. You didn't call a certain number. Basically, you called the police chief or the number for the town hall, you know. Or some people, they called the sheriff's office. And the sheriff's office called the police chief, and they reported a fire over at so-and-so place, you know. And like I said, the police chief, in most cases, he's the first one to hear about it.
We had no fire protection, except the town of Walker had one truck. And you could call them, and sometimes they'd get there, sometimes they wouldn't. They had no paid firemen or volunteers, just whoever they could get to drive the truck to the scene. And sometimes they'd get the truck there and they couldn't get water out of it because they didn't know how.
Everybody from the fire commissioner, the fire chief, everybody on down. Nobody had no training to do it. Just, you know, like you might go out there with a garden hose and put out a leaf fire or something in your yard. Nobody knew no training about nothing. You just went and did whatever you could. And like I said, I don't know of a house that we ever saved. It was a matter of go out there and wet down the ashes and all, because we never saved a house, I don't believe.
You didn't, like Mr. Pettitt said, you didn't save many houses. You saved a lot of lots and slabs, but didn't save many houses. With the equipment you had, you did the best you could.
Well, when we first joined, we didn't have no fire gear, no raincoats and stuff. We usually got this from donations from the people that worked at plants. They'd bring you rubber boots and raincoats, and that was the extent of our gear.
In the first few years that we were in the service, in the first few years there, we had a very less than ideal rate of success, I guess you could say, on fires. We didn't have the equipment that we needed, we didn't have the manpower needed, and we lost a lot of homes, we lost a lot of structures. And it was really very disheartening. You get out there and you try so hard to help, protect and save this property. And because you just don't have what you need, the tools that you vitally need to do this, you can't do it. And you have to look at these homeowners or these business owners, and you just realize that they've lost everything that they own. They've literally got the clothes there on their back. And because you didn't have enough water provided to you, because you didn't have the trucks to bring the water, or you didn't have enough hose, or you didn't have the equipment to do the job, now they've lost everything. I can tell you, it's one of the most sickening feelings that you'll ever experience, and it acts as an impetus to drive you. You'll do anything you can legally to get that equipment so that no one else has to experience that. I tell you, it really is sickening.
And I got involved in it when I talked to a guy over in Baton Rouge that trains for Baton Rouge Fire Department at the time, and he thought he'd come out here, and do training and all this. And I thought this was a good deal, I talked to the guy that was chief then. He said something about he didn't think that we needed anybody in Baton Rouge telling us how to run our business. Well, maybe somebody needs to, because we need some training, And so I told town council then, if they'd appoint me chief for a short period of time, if I didn't do no better, I'd quit.
Richard got an idea of setting up a fire district covering approximately a quarter of the parish. And we had a meet, was talking about getting with some of the representatives, state representatives, to set the district up. And we started the ball rolling.
And about 95% of the calls we answered was outside the city limits of Walker. And we kind of got the idea that why not make the people outside the town where we was answering the calls, that make them pay some of the money for it. So we got the idea. I checked in and found out about fire districts, where it's a taxing district and everybody inside the district pays taxes to support the fire department. And I said, this sounds like a better idea than the town of Walker furnishing fire protection over a third of Livingston Parish, you know.
Setting up a new fire district proved to be a difficult task, one that would take 6 years to accomplish. The Walker volunteers held town hall meetings and met with the community, not eager to support new taxes. However, on March the 22nd, 1975, after spending years educating the community on the benefits of a fire district, the police juror of Livingston Parish passed the resolution creating Livingston Parish Fire District No. 4. A 5-man board was set up to govern the newly established fire district.
The board was created for fire districts under state law under the revised statutes. Revised statutes allow for a 5-member board. We have 2 municipalities within our district limits, so under state law each municipality is allowed to appoint a board member, and then the parish council appoints 2 members. Once those members are appointed, those members then elect the chairman for a 2-year period, and that's currently how we do it in District 4.
On April 1, 1975, April Fool's Day, barely a week after becoming a district, the board voted unanimously to approve Richard Pettitt as the first fire chief of District 4. The realization of District 4 was a major victory for all involved. However, the fledgling fire district was far from the capable organization that we see today. The district was in desperate need of proper funding.
When we set the district up, we went to the people and floated a bond issue for $450,000 to buy 4 trucks, build 4 fire stations. Then we also had to have a millage tax passed also for upkeep of the stations and upkeep of the equipment. So technically it was 2 taxes to be passed at one time. But overall, most of the people that we talked to thought it was a great idea because it would help lower their insurance.
You know, had we not had this bond issue passed, there's no way that they could have purchased the equipment and to the fire apparatus or the structures or any of the materials that we needed to fight these fires. It was probably the single most important funding source that we had toward keeping this department up and running.
It wouldn't been for the bond money, we probably wouldn't be a fire district. The bond money give us money to operate on, and that was the beginning to where we started building other stations and being able to buy new engines and equipment and progressing to keep up with the community and the needs of the community.
By all the Pettitt and all the boards and everybody talking, they let us have our bond. And so we ordered 4 trucks and the equipment. And for us on the fire department, that was one of our happier times.
Before them trucks come up, which was the first, I think they used the term in the newspaper articles, tangible evidence of several years that I done put time, talking and everything and all to get this fire district formed. And once it was formed on paper, it took like 2 more years or something like that to actually get anything, you know. And them trucks was the first thing that, you know, you could actually see something from all these years of working at it. It's the first thing that we could actually show for it, all the work, you know. So it makes me pretty proud of it. Well, at least we're doing something now, you know.
I remember us coming down here to this station, and we was all waiting for them to bring them in. And I remember that we had a lot of the community people here wanting to see them, you know, and to us, you know, they were just new trucks, and all the stuff that we had been talking about and been studying about, you know, it had finally become all, not mine, but all of our volunteer fire department, you know, reality. We finally getting some equipment.
The first 4 trucks we got, the first 4 new fire trucks that we had were, there were several things about them. That was, the color of the trucks was very unique. The fire industry had just started going to the lime green or the international green trucks, and they were the ugliest things you've ever seen in your life. You know, you expect a traditional fire truck to be red and shiny with chrome all over it. These trucks were shiny. They had chrome on them, but they were this bright green, and you know, it was pretty shocking to us. But the trucks were awesome. They made more difference to us, and we started saving structures then. We started saving people. And we started seeing that, man, you know, just with the right equipment, we're able to do so much to be able to help. And those trucks were instrumental in bringing the fire district up to standards.
The Friendship Station we kind of had to hold up because the property that we bought was technically a swamp. And we had to make a drainage ditch to one side and have a lot of dirt put in. And in the process of doing the foundation for the Friendship Station, the northeast corner of the station, we dug down 6 foot and put in a 4x4 slab. And then you built up from that with a chain wall. Well, that 4x4 slab sunk out of sight. So we had to go back in and re-pour another slab on top of the first one. And we finally got enough materials in there to hold it. And we built a chain wall and then filled the dirt in and then made the slab on top of it, which I'm not sure, but I think it's 6 or 8 inches thick on the slab that the trucks had to sit on to keep it from cracking because of all the weight of the trucks. But so that station was one of the last ones built. One of the highlights of all of that was I had a garage that did not have a slab in it. It was just set up on some cinder blocks. Well, several of the volunteer firemen, we came over there and we jacked that garage up and put more cinder blocks under it until it was high enough that the fire truck would fit underneath it. And that's where the fire truck sat for probably about a year and a half under my garage. So it wasn't hard for me to be the first one out in the fire truck.
But we had a place for our fire truck. And thanks to Donald Denon, and thanks to Teddy Graham, and thanks to the people that approved the bond to let us buy them. So when we got our truck, we had a place to put it.
Now, coming back to early days, we built the forms to pour the concrete in for the fire station. And then discovered that we had to have certain kind of concrete for it, which was way to heck and gone over our budget. And it had to be a certain thickness to hold a truck. And then we were building it ourselves, and there we are building away, and we got Central built, and then they put up the frame building. It was glorious to have a fire station as a station rather than somebody else's. And we could have meetings here. We could have fire trucks parked outside while we had a meeting, have dinners here. It was a good time.
By 1980, the results of the bonding money was apparent throughout the entire district. But the new equipment and new fire stations, while essential, were not enough to protect the community. Many of the firefighters still lack basic training.
Me, that was one of the big things. Why I got interested, got appointed as chief of it, because the training, to me, was the thing I needed, you know. Even the little bit of equipment we had, we didn't know how to use it. So we had to get some training to learn how to use what we even had, which wasn't very much, but we didn't know how to use it. So training was the biggest thing, always had been the biggest thing about the department. You can take old equipment if you know how to use it and do a lot of stuff with it. The brand new equipment that you get and all, it's so good and all that, but it ain't, unless you know how to use it, it ain't no good.
We had training here once a month, and at the station meetings once a month we had training. Now I don't know what they're doing now. I imagine they're doing the same thing more or less, because I see all these tables in here and all the equipment they've got now that we didn't have. That was, we crawled around here and with a blindfolded mask on, air mask, put tape on it and blindfold it and crawl around hunting whatever you could find, the baby doll that was hidden.
When we first started fighting fires, we tried to fight the fires from outside. You can't fight a fire run outside the house. You have got to go in and find where the main heat of the fire is. You have to go in a house fire if it's all possible. If it's fully engulfed, then the only thing you can do is go to the doorways and windows and shoot in it, the water into it. As we got more proficient in our training, we got more proficient in fighting the fires.
In firefighting, it just looks like you go in there and putting water on fire, but it's a lot of details to it that people don't realize until they go to some kind of training for it. I can remember one time we went to assist a neighboring fire department, and when we rolled up there to it, and smoke was blowing out of it, and the other fire department, they had hoses out and they was putting water up into this building. One of our firemen, they got there and they went inside, and it was just a small fire in there. So that's just one of the examples from your training that if you can do more damage than good by not having your training.
By 1982, all the hard work, training, dedication had turned the organization into a working firefighting unit. But it was yet to be tested in its greatest challenge yet. A disaster of never-before-seen proportions. A disaster that threatened to destroy an entire town.
Livingston train derailment. September 25th, 1983, 5:30 a.m. in the morning. 43 cars to the Illinois Central Gulf Rail Line left the tracks, 37 of them carrying a confirmed hazardous material. I realize that sounds like rote, but in my past and experience, I have used this experience quite a bit as a training aid. I worked my way up through the hazardous material field in doing this. But you got to understand, at that time, very few fire departments had much formal training in dealing with hazardous materials.
It happened about early in the morning, like 5:30 in the morning. Say we had pagers in, and I was in there in my bed, sound asleep. That pager went off, and they sent a dispatch truck to go to town of Livingston that had train derailment. And I remember my dispatcher at the time adding the comment after she dispatched the truck, adding the comment on it, "Y'all hurry up, the whole town is on fire." And that kind of shook me out of bed real quick when she said that. And I got my clothes on, went out and jumped in my car. And I can remember when I got in my car, my radios come on and all, which I monitored the sheriff's office and all the other fire departments around and all, you know. And I could hear the town of Livingston Fire Department tell the sheriff's office, "Get a hold of every fire truck you can. The whole town's on fire." You know, boy, this got to be something, you know. Took out of here and I drove. Well, just don't tell the police how fast I drove to get to Livingston.
You know, I live in the little town of Walker, which is about 8 miles from ground zero from the derailment. That morning when the derailment occurred, I literally heard it. I heard and felt it. The ground shook. Being young and full of vim and vigor and really excited about this, I wanted to be the first one there. And I jumped up, got dressed, and I was the first one to the fire station. I got in that bright green truck and I took off. Well, as luck would have it that morning, I wasn't the first one there. The fire chief, Mr. Pettitt, was the first one there. The department had purchased him a car that he could respond in. It was a Plymouth Grand Fury, for those of you that remember them. It was old. It's an older car, but it was brand new. It was a police package, so it flew. It was very fast. And I can remember that morning he passed me on US 190, headed that way. And he told me, Mark, I need you to bring that truck to the first, just bring it right up behind my car. Well, his car was so much faster than my truck. He was going to be there several minutes beforehand. Boy, and I can remember, I'm going to be just like him one day. God, that's my hero, you know.
When I got to Livingston, you could look down Highway 190 and see nothing but fire blowing down there. And I stopped, I seen the Livingston police had a roadblock set up on 190. When I went around it, I seen the train conductor there, had the bill of lading in his hand and all. And I asked him what's in them cars and all. And I remember looking at them, getting names off of them, and I carried a book in my car of, you know, how to fight different chemicals and stuff. And I remember looking at the names on there, looking it up in my book as just how to fight them fires. And I can't remember what the book said, but in plain English it come down to run. And I said, well, I don't really have an option of running, you know. But I remember getting on the radio and telling my fire trucks, asking them, where you at now? And they were passing Valerie Watts' store out there on this side of Livingston. I remember telling them to stop right there. Don't come no closer to this thing, because I thought the whole town was going to blow up.
And we did. We got to the scene, and you know, first responder field, they talk about what is referred to as tunnel vision, where you're so focused on what you're doing, it's almost like looking through a soda straw. You're seeing just what you're focused on and not what's happening around you. And this particular morning, I arrived on the scene, pulled up there behind his unit. The engineer from the derailment was approaching him. He had a document in his hand that listed, it's called a wheel report, which lists all the products that were on board and identifies them. And he began to show the chief. And you know, the one thing that really stuck out in my mind was the way the guy's hands were shaking. Understandably, he'd just been involved in a major chain derailment, but his hands were shaking very, very heavily. And he'd point out and he'd tell the chief, yeah, this is involved in it. And I saw the chief kind of raise his head up. And I saw the chief look around. And it was like it was the first time it was like waking up out of a dream for him. He looked around, and as he did, I began to look around. You know, and you know how it is. You see one person looking, you have a tendency to follow their line of sight. And we were literally, our vehicles were literally sitting amongst burning tank cars. We had literally weaved our way around these things through tunnel vision. And the chief said, you know, I think maybe we're a little too close. So he brought the engineer with him. We backed up a little bit. We got out of that immediate area. And the guy would tell him that this is involved. And due to his training, he had much more training than we did. We were a little too close. And we kept backing up and we kept back until we were probably that morning when daylight broke, we were probably 1.5 miles from the actual ground zero. And frankly, we were still too close.
I got in about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, and my wife told me, she says, that pager's been going off all night long. I said, what's the problem? She says, I don't know. And about that time, they set the pager off again and asked for any firemen that can respond. They needed it there at Livingston for the train derailment. So I got on the phone and talked to the dispatcher and found out that Richard was already out there. So I got dressed and got out of my police uniform and got dressed and went that direction. I ended up taking right at 2 weeks of work off from the city.
It was an amazing event. The town of Livingston is where it occurred. The fire station had been severely damaged by the initial blast of one of the rail cars rupturing. They couldn't respond to an incident in their own town because they couldn't get their apparatus out of the station. So it fell upon us to be able to provide it. As the day grew, it was something like none of us had ever seen. The devastation, the damage, having to evacuate people because of products being released from these tank cars. All the different agencies coming in. I was at that time working for the sheriff's office in Livingston Parish, and I was so into this that I would work my shift with the sheriff's office, go home and change and put on a District 4 uniform and come back and spend my nights out on the scene. I was here all 14 days, and it was something that we hoped that we'd never see in our parish again, but it was it was a tremendous experience, a learning experience for everyone involved. And we were very fortunate that we didn't lose anyone.
It was amazing. If you could see, they'd show us pictures that they had took of the derailment and how every day as these cars was burning and blowing up and blevian, that you'd see how much distance that they would blow through the woods and stuff. They had one that I want to say in my mind, it blew about 40 foot away from where it was laying from one day to the next day.
It took off like rockets when the ends blew off of them. The end would blow out towards the 190, and the tank car would go the other direction into the woods, which was lucky that it did that, because if it would have went the other direction, it would have damaged a lot of houses and stores that was along the area there.
I'll never forget, we were in that command post that the state police had provided. This is some 3 or 4 days into the incident now. And all the people that knew about these products were there. And we asked one of these people with industry, what can we expect to happen with these products mixing? And the chemist told us, we have no idea. We wouldn't mix a beaker of this stuff in a laboratory because we'd be scared of the reaction. Now we've got rail cars full of stuff, 30, 40, 60,000 gallons of this stuff mixing. And they could tell us in many cases that we've never tried mixing these two products.
One time they come to us and they asked us to get ready to put it out, and they lined us up, and like I say, I was heavy and slow, so they said, well, they was going to let me drive the truck because I was slower than getting the hoses out than a lot of our other good guys. So they got us all lined up. We got our air packs on, and we was ready to do it. And then the state police hazmat said, no, we ain't going to do that. So we didn't go in and attack the fire as it was burning then.
See, the fire was so much that we didn't have the water. Was a big thing then that we couldn't. The town of Livingston didn't have the water supply to really try to fight the fire with, because it would have took a humongous amount of water to try to fight the fire. And it would basically just keep everybody away from it and let it burn out.
Lieutenant Poe with the state police, who was in charge of the hazardous materials section, as well as they also did explosives and bomb disposal and so forth, had came up with a very radical idea. You know, we look at some of these products were very dangerous if they were released into the environment. If they burned, in some cases they were flammable, the byproduct of the fire was not quite as dangerous. So he came up with a very radical idea of taking a shaped charge of explosives and placing on these tank cars, inventing them, rupturing these cars that hadn't ruptured yet, so that the product would go ahead and burn out in a controlled environment. We could choose which ones we burned so that we didn't get a reaction, let them burn out, and it would aid in speeding up how quick the event was over. In our particular incident, we were set up with one of these green trucks at a fire hydrant, flowing water out of a very large nozzle to keep some of these train cars cool so that they didn't explode or levy or react with one another. And the state police told us that we're going to set these charges, and at a point we'll blow a siren, which is going to be our notification to you to unhook your truck from the hydrant. Don't worry about any of your equipment. Leave it on site. Get in your truck and leave, because we've only got a few seconds before his charge goes off. Now bear in mind, they're traveling back and forth to this site in an armored personnel carrier, a tank if you will. We're in a fire truck, okay? There's not a lot of protective equipment there. They told us that should the truck stall or stumble, if you will, get out of the truck, immediately abandon it. They would pick us up with the tank as they came by. And I can tell you the tension was very high. When we heard that siren go off, I don't think we've ever disconnected a truck so quickly. And fortunately, the truck didn't stumble, because we were able to get out. The truck performed as it was supposed to, and we evacuated the area, and they did. They set off the charges in this big fireball, but it didn't cause any more damage. It allowed the products to burn out very quickly, and probably brought the conclusion of that incident a whole lot quicker than it would have been had they not done that. It changed the way not only we trained. You got to understand, at that time, that was the largest chemical train derailment that had ever occurred in the nation where there was not an immediate loss of life. No one was immediately killed or injured from the wreck. And it became a point of contention with everyone. The fire service, the law enforcement, hazardous material, emergency response, that one incident made tremendous changes in how everyone conducted themselves in an emergency, how they handled hazardous materials, the amount of training that they received. It really was a starting point for a lot of, and for myself as well. I saw that there was a lot more to this hazardous materials than I ever knew before. I became very interested in it, and I ended up, long story short, teaching at LSU in that field. You know, it was something that really acted as an impetus for many of us to further our educations in that area.
On the heels of the devastation of the 1982 train derailment, Fire District 4 had to rise to the occasion again when the parish faced a torrential flood the following year.
Wow, flood of '83, and that's coming right in behind the train derailment here. We had a series of rains. The waterways in the area were pretty much inundated by water, and it caused unprecedented flooding in our area, the lower portion of Fire Protection District 4. We spent days bringing people out, people who had never had problems with high water before, because we had trucks that set a little higher, whether it be our fire trucks or our grass rigs, four-wheel drive vehicles, and so forth. We were instrumental, or the primary on-site agency, to try to bring some of these people out and help to support them. We worked several days without sleep, all of us did, trying to help support people. We've never seen the likes of that flooding in lower Livingston Parish before, or since then, I guess, for that matter.
We had a lot of resources during the flood of '83. Joe Arminio, myself, my dad, were in his bass boat on Highway 16 trying to get in and get people out of their homes north of Denham Springs. And I hope we never experience anything like that again. You know, that's probably the worst flooding I've ever seen in my life, and I hope it's the final.
Yeah, well, the water was very swift, and walking in water, this flood water, you don't know where there's a hole under your footing or not. We tried to stay in boats, but sometimes you had to get out. Most of what I remember about it, we'd pull up to the residence, and if everybody wanted to go, we would put them in the boat and go from there. And I do remember one thing about it: the ants were terrible. Big fire ant nest floating in the water, and you get in one of them, they'd eat you up. And they just grouped together, and they would float on that water, and you would get into the fire ants. I do remember that. That was terrible.
It was water everywhere, the highest I've ever saw it. I almost come over to Interstate 12 over there by O'Neill Lane. All up in the Watson area, Port Vincent area, people were down there flooded out, and they were rescuing people, running here, there, and the other. I did some rescue, but most of the area was from the other areas up there. I stayed. They was busy doing what they had to do. I stayed in my area just in case we had something that we needed to respond to. Something like that, if they was busy rescuing or couldn't get a truck out, the next station closest would roll. And we was kind of on the northern end of the system up there. Wascomb was the northern part, and we was next, and Walker was about the middle ways. And we went two different ways. Went to Wascomb or to Walker. But there was a lot of flood. A lot of people around Watson area flooded down toward Denham Springs, Port Vincent, in that area.
Well, it started in Watson. As it moved down the river, Watson caught it, and then Denham Springs, and then 7th Ward and Port Vincent. We had in Port Vincent, there's a house in Port Vincent on the right side going into Port Vincent that has a concrete block flood wall around it. The guy built it after the first flood, which was not as high as 83. And here, 83 came along, and he's sitting in his front yard, in his front, watching the flood waters out over his flood wall. And his driveway gate gave way. One second he was dry, and the next second he had 3 feet of water in his house.
We was called over to Plantation Estates over below Denham Springs, a subdivision over there. And we took our rescue unit over there. The people was trapped in the floodwaters over there and all, you know. And we went over there and we had a aluminum bateau boat. And I remember it mainly because me and one of the other firemen, we took this boat and pushed it back through the floodwaters back to this house. Well, that, best I can remember, two women, I think, and there was either 3 or 4 small kids that was trapped in here by the floodwaters. So we go up there and load them all on the boat. Well, because the boat wouldn't hold all of us. So me and the other fireman, we waded in the water and pushed the boat along, you know. And I was beside this boat, and the water done got up pretty close to my neck, up in my chest and all. And we'd been walking down like a street or something, and the floodwaters were coming down another street, come to an intersection in the street that was, you know, under 5 foot of water or so. And when the undertow of this floodwater was trying to take my feet out from under me. Well, one thing about all these years, I've never learned how to swim. And I had, if my feet lose contact with the ground, the current's gonna take me underneath this boat. And the only thing I could do would either be to hold on to the boat, which if I did, if I held on to the boat and it took me underneath of it, I'd turn that boat over and dump these little kids in the water. I didn't want to do that because ain't no telling how many people would drown then. I either have to hold on to the boat and turn them in the water or let go of the boat, which means I'm going to drown. And about the time I made up my mind, just, okay, I'm going to go ahead and drown, you know, this is the end. Well, I managed to get my toe back on the curb on the other side of that street, you know, where I could keep my feet on the ground and get on out of it. That's what I remember most about the flood was that I looked at meeting my maker and all there that day.
With 2 of the biggest disasters in Livingston Parish history behind them, the members of Fire Protection District 4 proved to be a proficient firefighting organization. On January the 29th, 1985, Richard Pettitt stepped down as fire chief. He left an impression on the district that is still felt today.
Back in the late 70s, early 80s, District 4 was the only department that had extrication equipment. And Chief Pettitt had gotten some used equipment and set up one rescue truck. And that truck pretty well ran parish-wide if extrication was needed. Before the tools, the jaws of life came along, most extrications were done by towing companies that pull their winch cable off their truck, that hook it to a door and pull the door off of a car to gain access. And when the jaws of life were introduced to the fire service, it was a life-saving technique involved with it. The tools were purchased, put on a truck, and wherever the rescue truck was needed, the rescue truck went. If it went to Ponchatoula, whether it stayed here in town, whether it went to Watson, it went where it was needed. Richard Pettit's vision in general has done so much, in my opinion, for the fire service as a whole. And bringing extrication in, which he worked extrication with the Baton Rouge Police Department for a while, and bringing in yet another technique to the firefighters here, it's been tremendous.
Richard was a very good chief. I started in about 78, 79. Richard was already here as a chief of District 4. As I said before, he was a very dedicated person. He wouldn't ask you to do anything that he wouldn't do himself. He gave us a lot of training because we learned by the seat of our pants mostly. We didn't have a LSU out here teaching us how to do things. So he was a great individual. He worked full time as a police officer in Baton Rouge, and filled in full-time chief out here. So he stayed real busy. I've seen him so tired that he'd sit up against the wall. with his leg propped up and almost fall asleep from fighting fires all night, and he go to work the next day. He's a great individual. Most of our training was taught by Richard.
I always told everybody that I think every little boy, when they're real little, wants to grow up to be a policeman or a fireman, one or the other. And me, I've been a little boy all my life, and I never could make up my mind which I wanted to do, so I just did both of them.
Donald D. Don, one of District 4's founding members and a close friend of Richard Pettitt, filled the role as a fire chief. He was officially appointed to the position on February the 14th, 1985. Under D. Don's careful watch, District 4 grew to cover the village of Port Vincent, and he oversaw the building of the district's 5th station.
Chief D. Don was another good chief. There again, he was one that focused on training. He did a lot for the department. He's brought us up with our 5th station at the time, added some apparatus, and he did a great job for this department as well.
Donald stepped into Richard's shoes. He had big shoes to fill, but Donald had worked closely with Richard for many years. He understood what his goals, his visions were, and he was able to expand those visions as well as to bring in some of his own. Donald was also a very strong driving force in Fire Protection District 4.
Mr. Donald, if you ever met Mr. Donald, you know, you definitely walk away knowing you'd met a friend. He's an easy, you know, talking guy, easy listener, always got jokes. You know, he's a charismatic kind of person.
I hope that I was a service to the community and did everything the best of my ability at the time. When I first came on as chief, we had some financial problems. About the first 3 years of being chief, they probably was ready to run me out on a rail because I was very tight on the pennies. And but the first year I was chief, we didn't have to borrow $20,000 or $30,000 to finish out the year. We had been borrowing money to finish out the years, and that wasn't the way to operate a department. And when I resigned from the chief's position, they bought 3 brand new trucks, paid pretty well for the 3 of them without, they did float a bond or a loan for part of it, but not all of it. So, I hope that part of that was, well, I know that part of it was me helping save money here and there, cutting some corners, but it was corners that needed to be cut.
Donald E. Don served as fire chief for 10 proud years. The board appointed his successor, Wayne Lynch, to the position on February the 9th, 1995. In his 5 years as chief, Lynch brought many advancements to the district. He added 4 more stations to the district, built a new training center, and acquired 5 new apparatuses. On March 1st, 1999, the chief oversaw the hiring of the first part-time firefighter, and in February 2005, he entered into an agreement with the Livingston Parish Communication District, a decision that improved the district's reaction and response time.
Mr. Wayne Lynch, he was actually the fire chief when I came on. I guess if you had to describe him, he was more like a drill instructor than anything, and he was a little rough and gruff. He got his point across. He was dedicated, worked tremendously hard. He pushed training. That was one of the things I remember about him is we seemed like we trained more than we actually went out on scene. So that was good for me as being a young fireman. That's probably what I needed the most was the training part of it. He didn't have maybe Mr. D. Don's administrative skills, but he definitely was a firefighter, and he didn't have a problem getting in there and getting his hands dirty. You knew when he was chief, he was there with you.
From the department's first junior fireman to its first paid fireman, James Wascomb became District 4's first full-time chief on January the 16th, 2001. Wascomb was raised in this department, and now he is responsible to lead and maintain the department for future generations.
A fire chief's train of thought is, let's make it better for the next chief. Let's make it better for the next firefighter. Let's make it easier for them than what we've had it. And I think that's been a train of thought for many years. That's not just something that's came around. And I think each chief prior has done that. You know, Chief Dedon had it a lot easier than Chief Pettitt had it. Chief Lentz had it easier than Chief Dedon. I had it easier than Chief Lentz did. You know, so you strive and you have your goals set to make your fire department better, because somebody's going to take over your spot one day. And you don't want that person to struggle with the same issues that you've had to struggle with. So you build your department to where it's going to the future, to where if somebody else takes over, when they take over, this work's already done. They have their visions and goals to shoot for at that point.
James has come on as a young guy. He was, I think, 1985. And he'd been associated with the fire department before then with his daddy. And I was already here. He was 16 years old. He worked his way up through the ranks and got old enough to join full-time for St. George. He's progressed this community, the fire department, to keep up with the community's growth. As you know, this community has grown by leaps and bounds, especially since Katrina, and it's an ongoing thing to try to keep up with it. James is an outstanding job doing that. Got all the respect in the world for him, and I think he'll continue to do the great things for this fire department.
Today, the department has several full-time employees, including Joe Arminio, one of District 4's finest volunteers and now the organization's first full-time deputy chief.
I guess being able to serve your community in a positive way, being able to do things that you know that will benefit someone else on a daily basis. I think it's a self-rewarding feeling, and pretty much why a firefighter does what he does.
Clearly, District 4 has grown and changed with the times. It has changed from an organization that operated out of a shack to a fully formed fire district. The success of the department is a beacon of pride for all that have served.
I've got to tell you, when I first joined the fire department, and there was literally a little temporary building that was probably 10 by 10 that had a radio and a dispatcher in it. The fire truck was parked on a piece of bare ground with a tarp pulled over it because they didn't even have any structure to put the truck in. Till now, we've got numerous stations. We've got millions of dollars worth of equipment. We've got paid personnel. They have volunteer personnel. They have equipment that we've never imagined, 20 or 30 years ago that they would have. This department has really come into itself, and District 4 is one of the leading fire districts in the parish, and in this part of the state, for that matter, is for the advancements in equipment and manpower, the success rate, the accomplishments that they've made. They have really become a leader in the area, and it's a point of pride. I've got to be honest with you.
Makes me feel good that we was a part of something. The guys that got out there and fought for this and politicked for it, and promised the people they would, that would help them. There were several of them that did that, in each area. And look back on it now, you were promising people something that you didn't know what's going to happen yourself. We're going to start a fire department. We need to vote to support it. Well, here we are. We out there didn't know nothing about firefighting, didn't know nothing about a fire department. And we out there talking to the voters of the parish and the area to support a fire station. And they did. We talked them into doing it. We had enough voters to, vote for it, to support it. And to look at it now, they've come a long, long ways. They got people on call 24 hours a day, and they say most volunteer firemen, they volunteer their periods of about 5 years. And most of the guys that I was in here with was in there 15, 20, 25 years. And it was still some of them there when I left at 25 years.
I remember when I first started here, there was one guy on a truck. Now we've gotten to the point to where there's 2 guys working here during the day, 2 guys working here at night, so it's staffed 24 hours a day, when before it was only staffed, 12-hour day shift, and that was it. And then the volunteers, ran what they could at night. Well, now you got a guy here at this particular station walker 24 hours a day. And there's, before I got here, there was no ladder truck. They've instituted a ladder truck because of the buildings that we have around here now. The hotels that came because of Bass Pro and other buildings in our area. Hotels came in because of Bass Pro. While we got ladder trucks now, we have a specialized rescue truck to do high-rise rescues, severe extrications, just all different types of things. As it grows, Chief Wascomb's been providing us with the equipment to grow along with it, which is a very good thing.
At this time, we have 9 stations, and they're divided up into 3 districts. We have a northern district, a central district, and a southern district. For us working together, each district has a set of tones. If they're dispatched to a fire or vehicle accident or a medical call, and depending on the fire alarm or what the call is how many stations they dispatch, or they can set the whole district off. So the northern sector would have a major fire, all 3 stations up there. So we have 3 in the north, 3 in the central, and 3 in the southern.
The department has changed in so many ways. We started with 4 fire stations. Now we're up to 9, fixing to work on the 10th, getting the 10th one built. Technology has changed so much. Firefighting techniques have changed. So much changes in the fire service on a regular basis, to where your training comes in, and you're constantly having to train because things do change so much.
Well, from the time I started with 4 stations, now we have 9. It's grown tremendously equipment-wise. We've bought just numerous engines, tankers, refurbished tankers, bunker gear, SCBAs, everything that we need to fight fire safely and to do our job safely. The improvements that's been made to stations and remodeling some of them, because they were built back in the 70s, 75, 76 area. These growths has just been unbelievable to try to keep up with, and the department has done a good job with that. Manpower always seems to be a problem because we were all volunteer based. Now we're becoming a combination department where we have paid on-call firefighters, and the volunteers are just not what they used to be. So we don't, we get them when we can, and now we have to train them and then provide them with their medical training and their firefighting training. But the department has done real well as far as growth goes.
From a little fire department, a little small town fire department that had virtually no equipment, no training, no organization, to fairly well equipped, well organized, fairly well trained fire department. From a department that virtually did nothing really, put on a show about it because we never saved no buildings or nothing, to a department that we saved buildings, we saved lives and all.
District 4 is not the result of any one person, but the continued efforts of generations of firefighters and supporters. They educate our children, they protect our property, they save lives. They offer medical services and suppress fires. They are the volunteers, the part-time and full-time heroes of District 4.